Former bantamweight champion and drugs cheat TJ Dillashaw announced his MMA retirement following his most recent loss against champion Aljamain Sterling recently. And he has been discussing what ultimately drove his decision and has also shared his potential plans for the future. Today, we're discussing TJ revealing that his injury was too much and getting the lowdown on his future goals and his fellow pros' views on his retirement. First up, Jiri Prochazka has revealed how Dillashaw's injury influenced his own decisions. Former light heavyweight king Jiri Prochazka has recently discussed how seeing what happened to TJ in his title fight with Aljo influenced his decision to pull out of the rematch with Glover earlier this month. The Czech standout did one of the most chivalrous things in the history of MMA as he stood aside and vacated the 205-pound crown after injuring himself in training, explaining that he didn't want to hold up the division. Speaking on the MMA Hour recently, Jiri explained that after thinking long and hard about it, he came to the realization that the show must go on. Dana White referred to Prochazka as a stud for his decision to step down as champion, a decision plenty of other fighters have failed to make in the past. I mean, Conor McGregor simultaneously held up 2 divisions at one point. Jiri also referenced TJ when speaking about his decision, explaining that although he is still desperately wanting to fight against Glover, he wanted to be professional before adding, "I want to be humble to my team around me, to the UFC, and to my opponent," pointing to the fact that everybody knows the story about TJ. Do you guys think Jiri was right to step down? Give us your thoughts below. Cody Garbrandt has had his say on TJ retiring now. Stay tuned. Garbrandt and Dillashaw shared one of the most volatile rivalries the UFC has ever seen during the late 2010s. But that all ended as Dillashaw scored 2 big wins over his former teammate. Dillashaw knocked No Love out in back-to-back fights in 2017 and 2018. And shortly after the Sterling loss and just before TJ's retirement, Dillashaw had actually been called out again by Cody. However, TJ decided to retire from the fight game, and Cody has since given his thoughts. Responding to news of TJ's retirement on Twitter, Garbrandt showed he still has no love for his former friend, saying, "Can't compete like a real man, had y'all fooled for years," whilst also adding a cheeky needle emoji. Garbrandt wasn't the only fighter to give his opinion on the news, as Aljo wished Dillaroids a speedy recovery. He also suggested that if TJ does decide to return, then he would have no problem welcoming him back and giving him another crack at the king. Current UFC featherweight contender Arnold Allen referred to TJ's retirement as the McGregor loophole, but more on that particular angle in a bit. What do you make of Cody's words in particular? Some more bantamweight news now, and Sean O'Malley is coming through. After his razor-thin win over Peter Yan earlier this year, Sugar Sean is back in training and ready to go. The Montana man has his sights set firmly on TJ's old title, and rumor has it that he's been focusing on grappling in anticipation of a title fight against current bantamweight king Aljamain Sterling, or a #1 contender fight against the returning Henry Cejudo. O'Malley recently discussed his current training regimen with Believe You Me podcast host Michael Bisping and told the Count, "I'm just training, I'm getting better. I know I need to improve in aspects of my grappling, whether I fight Aljo or Henry. They're both very heavy grapplers, so I'm fine with sitting out. I'm literally just grappling. That's all I'm really doing nowadays. I'm fine waiting a couple of months. Just keep getting better." O'Malley doesn't have a fight booked right now, but considering the fact he is #1 in the division, the likelihood is that he will fight one of those guys next. Both men are superb grapplers, and with O'Malley arguably the division's best striker, something will have to give when he faces off against either Sterling or Henry next. Who do you guys think O'Malley should fight next time out? Give us your thoughts below. So what did TJ have to say about his retirement? Let's see. Dillashaw announced his retirement from fighting recently, despite appearing on the MMA Hour shortly after his loss to Sterling, where he told Ariel Helwani that he definitely wouldn't be retiring. And speaking for the first time since announcing he was walking away from the sport, Dillashaw revealed that his decision was based on some home truths delivered by his doctor. As you probably know, TJ came into the title fight with Sterling having already injured his shoulder in training and caught plenty of criticism for not disclosing the injury beforehand. Of course, the shoulder popped out multiple times during the fight before he was finished by Sterling, forcing him to face up to the reality that he would need to go under the doctor's knife. He recently sat down with former UFC heavyweight Brendan Schaub, revealing how he came to the decision that he would have to call it a day. He said, "I went and had a shoulder surgery surgery 4 weeks ago, and the doctor just kind of like had a raw conversation with me. Dillashaw then explained that the doctor was frank with him and told him that 3 shoulder surgeries in 3 years are going to take their toll, which made him think about his life outside of fighting and being able to be active with his son. Dillashaw's retirement was announced after an algorithm-based Twitter account revealed that he had been removed from the UFC roster, which he said wasn't how he planned on telling his fans. So how does he feel about the shock decision? Let's see. Well, Dillashaw, somewhat surprisingly, appears to be okay with his decision on the surface. He did seem to harbor a little bit of regret as to how he went out and still believes he's the best in the weight class. He mentioned that his exit from the top promotion was somewhat bittersweet, adding, "I go out there healthy, I get that belt back, especially against a fighter like Aljamain, who is such a great matchup for me, hence why I took the fight even though I was injured." Unfortunately, we will probably never know how a fully fit Dillashaw fares against Aljo, but most are in agreement that he at least gives a much better showing than he did last time out. TJ revealed that his injury was also part of his game plan going into the fight, as he was well aware that it could pop out again mid-fight. He went into detail about how he spoke with his doctor beforehand and had him tell him the best way to get the shoulder back into its socket in an emergency, suggesting to Shaw that it was just the same as any technique or diet or weight cut. You gotta game plan it all. Of course, that worst-case scenario ended up happening, which ultimately led to his decision to retire. Dillashaw then wrote a letter to the UFC thanking them for everything, explaining that ultimately it's just too much. Do you guys think he should have fought injured? Next up, Dillashaw has already discussed a potential return to the cage. TJ Dillashaw hasn't even properly begun his recovery from shoulder surgery yet, and already he has been discussing a possible return to the octagon. Speaking to Schaub on Food Truck Diaries last week, TJ revealed how a return would probably depend on how his other businesses are panning out. Dillashaw has become involved in various health and cannabis ventures over the past couple of years, so he will probably devote a large portion of his time to that now that his career as an elite-level fighter appears to have drawn to a close. But he isn't completely locking the door on that part of his life just yet. Speaking about the possibility of a return to the octagon further down the road, the former bantamweight champion revealed, "We'll see how successful things turn out for me outside the cage and just how busy I am and what life looks like," before explaining that life is pretty hectic these days. Of course, that business is going to be his focus going forward, so he can't really afford to jeopardize it, which is basically what happened in the run-up to the Dillashaw fight, as he spurned all talk of business unless it's got to do with my fight, as he puts it. Do you guys see Dillashaw ever returning to the octagon? Some have suggested TJ may have ulterior motives for retirement now. Stay tuned. As news of TJ Dillashaw's retirement broke, some people around the sport of MMA immediately cast suspicious glances his way. Dillashaw served a 2-year ban for taking EPO a few years back, and some people believe he could be retiring so he can use again, then readmit himself to the USADA pool. Conor McGregor has recently been accused of the exact same thing after it was recently revealed that he too has been removed from the USADA pool, and Dillashaw raised even more suspicions after going to bat for the Irishman, suggesting he's not doing anything wrong. Fortunately, this isn't the 1990s anymore, so there are now strict rules in place to stop drug cheats like TJ. Some have said that McGregor is quite obviously using steroids, considering the shape he's in these days, and Dillashaw doubled down on his thoughts, further explaining to Schaub that we don't have an off-season. We're tested 365 days a year. You don't get time to heal. I mean, cry me a river, TJ. Dillashaw then suggested that even if he were to take steroids to recover himself, he can't compete with it in his system. TJ tried to con fans into thinking that he actually believes that McGregor is only taking juice to heal up, but considering his own personal history of drug use, it's more likely he's trying to justify his own potential steroid use. What do you guys think? As always, thanks for tuning in today, and remember to drop in on us again next time when we will be discussing loads more cool bits and pieces. And why not do us a big favor by liking and sharing today's video, whilst also subscribing to our channel so you don't miss out on more great content in the future.